Hello, I'm Lyn Jarvis, contributing editor for Across the Fence, and whatever you're doing, please give me a few minutes of your time because we have something very special for you today. We're in Holland to see thousands of flower blooms as we visit the Alsmeer flower auction, the world's largest, shipping more than 19 million fresh flowers throughout the world every day, as well as to stop at the famous Keukenhof Gardens, known as the greatest flower show on earth. All that and more as we tour Holland in the springtime. When we arrived in Amsterdam, the capital city of the Netherlands, it was pouring rain and we climbed aboard a water taxi to escape the deluge. These boats crisscross the city of some 1 million people that is sometimes called the Venice of the North, because Amsterdam has 60 miles of canals with some 1,200 bridges. More than half the people have bicycles. We were not surprised to learn that the most visited place in the city is 263 Prinsengracht, the Anne Frank house, and even on this chilly, rainy day, the lines to enter stretched around the block. For 25 months, she and her family hid in back rooms until betrayed to Nazi authorities. They were arrested and deported to their deaths in concentration camps. Miraculously, her diary survived and she is one of the most remembered Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And prophetically she wrote,
I want to be useful to all people. I want to go on living even after my death. When I write, my sorrow disappears and my spirits are revived. But, and that's a big question, will I ever be able to write something great? Will I ever become a journalist or a writer?
Just 90 minutes from Amsterdam is the Peace Palace, home of the International Court of Justice. I asked Sasha Obradovic, legal advisor from the Embassy of the Republic of Serbia, about its history.
A Peace Palace as a building was established in 1913 on the idea of the Russian Emperor Nikolai Romanov with the funds, with the money of the Carnegie Foundation and with, of course, the Dutch soil. That was then a court inside the Permanent Court of International Justice, which was active during the League of Nations. And after the World War II, this became the International Court of Justice in this building. But also, in Peace Palace, you can find the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the oldest international institution dealing with the peaceful solution of international disputes. Also, the Hague Conference of International Private Law is inside, the biggest library of international law, and the Hague Academy for the scientists, young scientists, to deal with this very important matter. And for this, the Hague is known as the capital of international law.
It's about 7 o'clock in the morning and we're in the visitors gallery at the Alsmeer flower auction that I mentioned earlier. Holland produces more than 9 million flower bulbs annually, and throughout the country more than 23,000 acres of land are dedicated to greenhouse production. This auction house alone is more than 100 acres. Mind-boggling, isn't it? And I'll do my best to explain how it all works. Alsmeer sets world prices for flowers and plants by selling some 19 million flowers and 2 million plants daily. This happens by bringing supply and demand together, a fascinating process during which large and small batches of flowers are sold at auction. Being delicate and fragile, handling time has to be as short as possible. And amazingly, most of these blooms can travel within 24 hours from suppliers here in Holland to your grocery store or local flower shop. By 7 a.m., the flowers and bidders are ready and the auction begins. Called a Dutch auction, the price starts high and works its way down. Bidders get only a few seconds to push a button to make the bid. If pushed too soon, he might be paying too much. If pushed too late, someone else has outbid him and he goes home empty-handed. All very nerve-wracking. In a matter of minutes, hundreds of transactions are completed, again and again every day of the year. I loved being here, the color and fragrance, watching the constant movement, and wondering if any of these flowers would make their way to Vermont. Just down the road is Plucktown, a small tulip-picking garden that also brings flowers to Alsmeer. It is run by Annemieke de Haan, who not only grows beautiful tulips, but uses the farm to provide therapy for troubled youth.
Well, I work with people who had a psychiatric background. That's also where, with my picking garden, I want to create a place where they can work and where they can build on their self-esteem. By picking the flowers, working in the seasons, most of the time outside, with your head in the wind, hands in the ground. I believe that works healing, and I see that it really works that way.
She opened her tulip-picking garden in 2010, and those that aren't sold here go to auction, and it's a lot of work to get them ready. First, they have to be picked and run through a debulbing machine. The bulbs fall into a bin and are fed to sheep or used for compost. Surprisingly, it's more economical to get new bulbs than wait the 2 years for them to reproduce. Next, they are sorted into bouquets of 12 stems each and placed on a conveyor belt, where they are collected and put into larger bunches. And finally, wrapped for transport to the Alsmeer auction. After seeing what's involved to get the flowers from the farm to auction and eventually our tables at home, I will never complain about the price again. After our tour, we were surprised and pleased by Annemieke's generous gift of a bouquet of her tulips. And this is the perfect time to introduce our tour guide, Rebecca Faye Orman. Knowledgeable, fun, and we all decided that she would make the perfect neighbor. Thank you for taking such good care of us, Rebecca. Come tiptoe through the tulips, admire the amaryllis, and cruise past the crocuses as we enter Keukenhof Gardens, the world's largest flower spectacle. Upon entering the 79-acre garden, we were welcomed by the cheerful sounds of calliope music that would be our meeting place at the end of the day. The garden is open only 8 weeks a year, and during that short span of time, Keukenhof is visited by more than 800,000 flower lovers. The land was purchased in 1949 by the Royal Dutch Association of Bulb Growers, who created this showcase to promote the Dutch flower industry. Their efforts paid off, as Holland is now the exporter of 2/3 of the world's fresh flowers and bulbs. While exploring the multitude of gardens and pavilions, many say they are overwhelmed by the breathtaking array of color and perfume. Come along and enjoy this floral delight along with us.
Ja, kijk eens, hier is de lucht op licht. Ja, meneer, het is donker. Ja, kijk eens daar of er regen komt. Nee, er is gedonder. Ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij s'avonds. S'avonds in de maneschijn als vader en moeder naar bed toe zijn. Ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij s'avonds. Ja, kijk eens, hier is de deur ook dicht. Ja, meneer, die is open. Ja, kijk eens daar of het carnaval staat. Nee, die kan nog lopen. Ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij s'avonds. S'avonds in de maneschijn als vader en moeder naar bed toe zijn. Ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij, ja, kom kittel mij s'avonds.
Our next stop was Hoorn, once one of Holland's richest port cities and home of the Dutch East India Company dating back to 1357. As we entered the harbor, we were greeted by the Ship Boys of Bontekoe, a popular adventure story about 3 youth who survived a tragic shipwreck while en route to Java. Fishing is an important part of the town's economy, and the local fish shop made for an interesting stop. Surprisingly, the odor of fish was almost unnoticeable as the place was well ventilated, and nearly all the fish had just been caught and the docks are only a block away. These are smoked eel and mackerel, and some of the group thought it might be fun to bring some home, but decided against it. Since no one had ordered herring, we wondered why this young woman was preparing slices of the freshly caught fish. We were about to find out. Rebecca needed a volunteer to eat raw herring the Dutch way, and Marco Ayala, the video editor for our show today, thought he was up to the challenge.
You hold it up like this. High in the air. As much as you can get in your mouth. And wait. Woo! A round of applause. How was it? Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's yours as a gift.
Next, we boarded a canal boat to tour Broek-op Langendijk, a long village built on a dike and site of the world's first vegetable auction. Often referred to as the realm of 1,000 islands, as more than 15,000 small islands dot the canals, and over the centuries the villagers developed a farming style adapted to the landscape. Most of the houses and garden plots were located on small islands and only accessible by water, so all planting and harvesting was done by boats called punts. The waterborne specialization reached its peak in 1912 with the construction of a unique sailed-through auction house, Broker Feeling. A canal runs right through the auction hall and the produce was floated in on boats, and it was here they developed the Dutch auction style of bidding that we saw at Alsmeer. In its heyday, there would be up to 150 farmers waiting their turn to sail into the auction house. The place is now a museum and real auctions are no longer held here. But the good news is that now you can pretend to be a trader from the 17th century and bid your way to glory. And who would have thought that this historic vegetable market would be used for weddings? But it makes a nice setting, doesn't it? Hard to believe, but a visit to Enkhuizen would end our Holland adventure. It's a magnificently preserved city that was established in 1355. This is the Church of St. Pancras. The city continued to prosper due to its thriving herring fish industry and trade from the Dutch East India Company. By the late 1600s, it boasted the largest fishing fleet in Holland, with more than 4,000 boats that brought in tons of fish that were sold throughout the world. Now, with a population of some 16,000 people, this historic city retains its old charm, and its harbors attract thousands of boating enthusiasts. Our time in Enkhuizen concluded with a visit to a local family who lived on Torenstraat, where Jolanda and Feta Bos were waiting for us, along with a plate of cookies that were a welcome sight after our walking tour of town. Jolanda introduced us to her boys Frederick and Paige, who were a bit shy, not quite used to the idea of strangers taking over the house. Feta got out the family Bible and told us a little about his family history.
It's even going back to around 1700, 1790, something like that.
This led to a hearty discussion on how some of us had traced our genealogy and what interesting things we had discovered. Jolanda's sand cookies were my favorite, and she kindly agreed to give us the recipe.
You need flour. I don't have that now. It's finished. You take about 200 gram flours, real butter, about 200 grams too. You take some eggs, maybe four eggs, sugar, 150 grams, and some extra vanilla sugar. Then you'll mix it and put it in the oven, 200 degrees, maybe 20 minutes, and then it's finished. And they're delicious, of course.
A perfect ending to our time in Holland with our visit to the Bush family and getting to try these little sand cookies. And I'm going to be giving you that recipe in an upcoming edition of In the Kitchen with Across the Fence. In all my travels, I've discovered that all it takes is a friendly smile to be extended the hand of friendship. I hope you've enjoyed our Holland adventure as much as we have, I'm Lyn Jarvis for Across the Fence, and thank you for watching.
Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX TV.